Just as every photo has a story behind it, so does the subject within the frame. Deep between the chemical formalities or pixelated visuals of a photograph lies a deeper meaning. A deeper record other than just a memory snapped in time. A transition from the tangible to the intangible, one that entails trials, tribulations, joy, adversity, and even happily ever afters. Stefan Kowalczyk is the subject within the frame. A native of Poland who grew up during the rise and expansion of communism in Eastern Europe, always envisioned the American dream, as most did of his generation. His story merges borders with the likes of Sweden, Germany, England, and even South Africa, with one common denominator: the ultimate pursuit of happiness.
I was the youngest. I had two older sisters, Danuta and Christina, and of course parents. My further family, my mother was the oldest among 10 children. My father was the youngest among 9 children. So altogether, I'm talking about now cousins, it was probably around 200 people. So especially during the family affairs, like Easter holiday or Christmas parties, not to mention birthday parties, always it was a big crowd, a lot of adults and a lot of children.
However, with the good times came the bad. By the end of World War II, Poland was left in ruins. Kowalczyk's beloved Warszawa was trying to rebuild itself from the destruction left behind.
First of all, Warsaw was destroyed in like 75%. It was flat. So certain parts of Warsaw practically was impossible to live. A lot of people from different parts of Poland were coming to rebuild and to reconstruct the whole city. It took probably another 5, 10 or 15 or even 20 years to rebuild certain district of Warsaw. So everything was short. Wood was short because of the actual political situation. All other European countries, I'm talking about the Western Europe, had a chance to use the Marshall Plans introduced by American administration. Poland and rest of the Eastern European countries were not allowed to use this huge loans offered to the governments. So naturally, I remember there was no such a thing like certain fruits. There were probably, when I was 10 or 15 years old, only occasionally I could have, maybe on Christmas, I could have a lemon or orange or banana. The rest was practically unknown. From the pictures, from the movies we were watching, we could see certain fruits or vegetables. Meat was very short always, because then again, under certain conditions, Poland had to export most of the meat to the Soviet Union. So there was shortage practically of every product. And of course, because of the war, there was a shortage of places to live. So there were, I was living in an apartment, a 3-bedroom apartment, built in a house built before the Second World War, and my parents were living there, but because of the conditions after the war, where a huge part of the city was destroyed, we had to live with other families as well together. So instead of one family, they send us some unknown families as well for time being.
In 1945, the year Kowalczyk was born, communism had taken control of Poland.
Officially, they called this liberation. And from the very beginning, the generation of my parents knew from the very beginning that it's not liberation. They introduced totally new system, the communist system, which was absolutely unknown to people of my parents' age. What did I know when I was 10 or 12 or 14? I didn't have an idea what this system is all about, because I didn't know what was in the past, of course.
When Kowalczyk was in high school, the American dream grew bigger and bigger in his mind. He was a very brilliant student, as his parents always emphasized the importance of a good education, telling him the value of the mind and an education is something no one can take away from you. With such education, Kowalczyk began to realize the society he was living in, one of barriers and restrictions. Even the mentioning of a potential escape of communist territories could lead to arrest. At any moment, a soldier could stop a civilian in the street and question them, under any circumstances. People were afraid to be out in public. However, the exposure to American propaganda and cinematography only motivated him to strive for such an American dream. After high school, Kowalczyk pursued collegiate studies in economics at the School of Economics in Warsaw, one of the most prestigious institutes of its kind in Europe at that time. As his passion was education, already fluent in Russian, German, and the likes of English, when the time came, he would be prepared to make his American dream happen.
So I remember with all my school friends, already in high school, we were talking that one of these days we are going to leave if nothing will change.
And in 1975, after working at one of the biggest commercial banks in Warsaw, he began to take steps to the land of milk and honey, along with hundreds of thousands of other Poles destined to leave their homeland for a better life.
I couldn't even tell my parents, not to mention my cousins, because let's assume that my parents, my mother or my father would say to another friend or friend of a friend, and if they would pass this kind of information that I want to stay for good, probably they could take my passport back. So everything was in secret, kind of.
After living only 14 months in Sweden, Kowalczyk already began to experience tribulations. After the authorities came into contact with him, and having no interest to permanently reside in Sweden, Kowalczyk took the next steps to reach his ultimate destination.
And then a few of my friends in high school were already in Germany. They left Poland before I did, so they were pretty good established. So the next step was I went to Germany, to Hamburg. I was in Germany more than a year, and the same situation was with the German authorities after the year. It's not that they told me to leave, but they questioned what is my status over there. I was still on a tourist visa. They can extend you once, they can extend you twice, but then after the third time they say you have to do something about it. So another friend of mine was already living in England, in London. So the next step was I took a boat, a ferry, and went to England. And then, of course, that was again this problem with visa. So this is how a couple of my friends applied for immigration to South Africa.
Which led him to Johannesburg, where he worked for the Barclays National Bank, along with opening a business importing oil paintings from Asia while remarrying for the second time. However, South Africa became another turning point. Civil war broke out, and no longer was it safe for Kowalczyk and his family to live there. Therefore, heading back to Europe was the only viable thing to do at that time. After returning to Poland, Kowalczyk began to weigh out his options, knowing it would only be tentative.
It was the matter to find probably the best country to live. So we went to England again, we went to Netherlands, to Belgium, we went also to Germany. But then again it was difficult to get established, because now I had this family, and it was the matter also how can we get a permanent residence over there. The situation at that time, I'm talking now middle 80s and end of 80s, the economical situation was so dramatic. practically there was nothing in stores. There was shortage of food. There was shortage of basic products. That was terrible. So it was a huge disaster.
It was then that Kowalczyk decided it was time to fulfill a lifelong goal in the pursuit of the American dream, and to make that dream become a reality. He came into contact with an old friend who currently lived in Chicago, and that friend soon became the true love of his life after 2 previous marriages. Not only was Kowalczyk coming to America to pursue his happiness, but also upon the instincts of true love.
Finally, when I arrived in Chicago, I was very happy. I was extremely happy because that was the country when I always wanted to be. So after all these turbulences, I'm talking about the last 12 years before I came here, finally I'm in America. Finally I'm with the woman I want to be, and I was looking forward for the American dream, great opportunities, because this American experience is, for me, it's a dream. Every day I live now, it's like I'm in a heaven.
Through all the trials and tribulations, good times and bad, that Stefan Kowalczyk has encountered throughout the course of his life, there is just one simple message that he wishes to leave for the younger generations.
Learn as much as possible, study as much as possible, get interested and get friendly with as many people as possible, because very often the situation is that you will need these people. And don't be afraid to take risks, and be open-minded, be kind to people, and you will definitely get the same in return.